The ramp drops. A wall of bullets slices through the morning fog. Men collapse before their boots even touch the water. In the first 5 seconds of Omaha Beach, half the first wave is already gone. The invasion meant to free Europe is seconds away from total collapse. This is the part of D-Day they never show you, the moment the entire operation nearly died on the sand. Hours earlier, before the sun touched the horizon, the English Channel lay silent beneath a low, heavy sky. The air was thick with moisture. The sea rolled in slow, grey waves that hid the movements of more than 5,000 Allied ships pressing toward the French coast. On the decks of those ships stood men who had waited, trained, and imagined this day for nearly a year. They had memorized aerial photographs, practiced assaults on replica beaches, and studied the layout of obstacles and bunkers they had never actually seen. Yet nothing in their training had prepared them for the weight of the silence that surrounded them now. Some soldiers clutched their helmets with white-knuckled hands. Others held rosaries. A few joked quietly, pretending to be braver than they felt. But beneath every facade lay the same truth. They were about to step into one of the most dangerous battles in human history. D-Day was not a sudden idea. It was the result of a vast, complex plan known as Operation Overlord, a plan involving deception, engineering ingenuity, political tension, and months of preparation across England. Entire towns had been cleared so troops could rehearse. Engineers built life-size models of German strongpoints using logs, concrete, and scrap metal. Soldiers threw live grenades into mock bunkers, practiced scaling cliffs under fire, and memorized the shapes of mines they might face on the beaches. An entire hidden world of training camps, supply depots, and fake armies spread across the British countryside. To mislead the Germans, the Allies created a ghost army of inflatable tanks, wooden aircraft, falsified radio chatter, and fake commanders. They deliberately leaked false intelligence, letting German agents believe the grand invasion would hit Pas-de-Calais instead of Normandy. The deception was so effective that Hitler remained convinced the Normandy landings were a diversion even after they began. But all the planning, all the deception, all the engineering brilliance nearly crumbled under the force of nature. On June 5th, a violent storm swept across the channel. Rain hammered the decks of ships. Winds slashed the waves into chaos. Landing craft pitched violently, nearly capsizing. Eisenhower's commanders urged delay, fearing disaster. But a delay could be worse. The tides would shift, secrecy would unravel, and German defenses would strengthen. It was a decision that could change the fate of the war. Meteorologist James Stagg reported a narrow window, a few fragile hours of calmer weather. It wasn't a promise, it was a chance. Eisenhower stared at the storm charts, at the faces around him, at the magnitude of what was at stake. And then quietly, he said the words that launched the greatest invasion in history. "Okay, let's go." The operation began in the sky. Just after midnight, American paratroopers from the 82nd and 101st Airborne jumped into darkness. The wind ripped them sideways, scattering units across the countryside. Men landed in flooded fields, their parachutes dragging them underwater. Some dropped right into German positions and were shot before they could cut themselves free. Others gathered in small groups, disoriented but determined, moving through hedgerows lit by gunfire. Yet that chaos, catastrophic on paper, shattered the German ability to respond. Reports came from everywhere. Normandy burned with rumors. Paratroopers in the fields, gliders in the trees, enemy movements on every road. German officers couldn't piece the picture together. Units stayed frozen, waiting for orders. and the one man who controlled the panzer divisions, Adolf Hitler, was asleep. None of his generals dared wake him. At 5:30 a.m., the channel erupted as Allied battleships opened fire on the cliffs. The bombardment shook the coastline. Massive shells carved craters in the sand. Soldiers offshore watched the sky ignite in orange flashes and prayed the artillery would break the Atlantic Wall. It didn't. German engineers had carved their fortifications deep into the earth. The concrete was thick, reinforced, and angled to deflect blasts. Machine gun nests were built into the cliff face, connected by tunnels, protected by steel doors. The bombardment blackened the beaches, but it didn't silence the guns. When the fire lifted, German soldiers sprinted back to their weapons and pointed them at the water below. Then came the moment that changed everything. At 6:30 a.m., the ramps dropped at Omaha Beach. For the men in those landing craft, the world became noise and pain and chaos. Machine gun rounds lashed the surf. Mortar shells burst into fountains of water and steel. Soldiers stumbled forward, tripping over the bodies of their friends. Some tried to swim when the water was too deep. Others sank instantly under the weight of their packs. The beach offered no shelter, no dunes, no rocks, nothing but sand and open sky. The Germans had planned it that way. Every meter of beach was covered by overlapping kill zones. MG-42s fired streams of bullets at nearly 20 rounds per second. Pre-sighted artillery targeted the places where troops were most likely to gather. From the German perspective, it was engineering perfection. From the American perspective, it was hell. The situation worsened by the minute. The amphibious Sherman tanks, meant to provide cover, had been launched too far from shore and sank in the violent waves. Without armor, infantry were exposed. The air bombardment had missed its targets, leaving bunkers untouched. Landing craft drifted in the tide and delivered troops directly into the most heavily defended sectors. Radio operators tried to send updates but were cut down before they reached the dunes. Officers were killed one after another. Some units landed hundreds of meters off course. Others were wiped out almost entirely, never firing a shot. At sea, officers considered pulling forces back. The entire invasion seemed ready to collapse. But what saved Omaha Beach wasn't strategy. It wasn't planning. It was the will of men who refused to die where they stood. Small groups, 5 men here, 8 men there, crawled forward through smoke and sand. They used shell craters as cover. They pulled wounded friends behind shattered obstacles. They spotted narrow gaps between machine gun lines and sprinted through them with nothing but desperation to guide them. This was not a coordinated assault. It was survival turning into momentum. Soldiers began climbing the bluffs using narrow gullies carved by centuries of rain. German guns couldn't depress low enough to hit them. Once atop the cliffs, they attacked bunkers from behind, throwing grenades through firing slits, clearing trenches meter by meter. Meanwhile, German command drifted deeper into chaos. Some officers believed Normandy was merely a distraction. Others begged for reinforcements. Some divisions moved without permission. Others waited for orders that would never come. The Luftwaffe barely appeared, overwhelmed by Allied air superiority. The panzer divisions, Hitler's most powerful reserves, remained idle until it was too late. By early afternoon, the tide had turned. The bluffs above Omaha were finally in Allied hands. Engineers cleared obstacles. Tanks and infantry pushed inland. The beachhead was secure, fragile, blood-stained, incomplete, but secure. By nightfall, the truth of D-Day stood stark and unflinching. 10,000 casualties, over 4,000 dead, entire units shattered. thousands of families who would never see their sons return. Yet because they held the line, because they climbed those cliffs, because they refused to collapse under impossible fire, Europe was given a future free of tyranny. D-Day did not win the war, but it made victory possible. As darkness settled over Normandy, exhausted soldiers sat quietly in the sand, listening to the distant echoes of battle fade into the night. Smoke drifted across the shattered remnants of the Atlantic Wall. Bodies lay where the tide had placed them. The world those men left behind felt far away, and the world ahead felt uncertain. But one thing was clear: June 6, 1944 was not the story of a perfect plan. It was the story of imperfect men doing the impossible. A day that nearly failed. A day that changed history. A day the free world held its breath and did not break.